All right, so hello everyone. Good afternoon and good morning to those who are joining us from Hong Kong and joining us from Bahrain. My name is Dalal Buhajji. I am the director here at the Financial Services Department at the Bahrain Economic Development Board. I want to kickstart by welcoming you all to today's sessions on the MENA FinTech Hub. Which we're very proud to be partners and co-hosts with the FinTech Association of Hong Kong. Allow me just to give you a quick 1-minute overview on the agenda of today's session. We will kickstart by introduction by Benjamin Quinlan, who is the chairman of the FinTech Association of Hong Kong and the CEO and managing partner of Quinlan and Associates. Followed by that, we'll have some introductory remarks by David Parker, our co-chief investment officer at the Bahrain Economic Development Board. Followed by that, we'll have my colleague Naseem Fekri, who will walk you through a brief presentation on Bahrain's existing fintech landscape and ecosystem. Just to let you know, Naseem does cover the whole Asian market with a very strong focus on Hong Kong. Followed by that will be our very interesting panel that will be moderated by Syed Mushir Ahmed. On the panel will be some dear friends of mine in the fintech ecosystem, Yasmeen from the Central Bank of Bahrain, Badr Sater from Bahrain FinTech Bay, and Myrna Suleiman, the founder of FinTech Galaxy. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Benjamin, who will give a quick opening remarks. Benjamin.
Thank you very much, Dalal, and hi everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So as mentioned, my name is Benjamin Quinlan and I am the chairman of the FinTech Association of Hong Kong. It's a real pleasure to be working with Bahrain's EDB today, together with the FinTech Association of Hong Kong, to look at the FinTech opportunities within the MENA region. By way of background, just so you're aware, FTAHK, as we are known, is a not-for-profit independent industry representative body for FinTech in Hong Kong. We have about 1,700 members within the organization, including over 300 something corporates at last count, with a 15-member board, and we structure it under 8 core committee groups that explore topics such as AI and big data, blockchain, digital banking, regtech, and so on. In terms of, I guess, what we're all about, like many industry bodies, we're there to really do 3 primary things for our members, which is really around advocacy. So acting as a voice for the ecosystem, engaging with governments. We often speak with our government and semi-government bodies here in Hong Kong around support for the fintech ecosystem, regulatory change, and so on. So it's a very fruitful and engaging task, making sure that we obviously sit at the forefront of driving constructive policy change within this space. The other part is really around collaboration, so bringing together the ecosystem and all its parts, just to identify all those synergies and partnerships from what is a very, I would say, crowded space. I mean, fintech companies are definitely numerous, so working out how to navigate this landscape is something we definitely help our members do. And then finally is educate, really. So that's really around running learning events and training sessions, leveraging our member network, a lot of leaders in the financial services industry, whether they are working with incumbents, some of the unicorns out here in Asia, and really helping to nurture that next generation of talent. So the idea of us as an association is to really act as that mouthpiece for Hong Kong's broader fintech efforts. I think in the context of these kinds of discussions, we really do enjoy them, because I think key to fintech obviously succeeding is integrating and plugging in with the global ecosystem. Many people operating in this space obviously have to think much broader in terms of who their target clients are and who ultimately they're competing against. And I think the nature of fintech, given many of these technologies transcend borders, be it payments, be it blockchain, a lot of things that obviously contribute to the need to integrate and partner with institutions such as Bahrain EDB to really, get to the nuts and bolts of things. At its core, I'm sure you don't want to hear from me anymore around what's happening with fintech in Hong Kong. For those of you who don't know the ecosystem here, go to the FTAHK website, ftahk.org. You can find out a bit more about what we do and how our memberships work. But overall, as one of the world's leading financial centers, if any of you are exploring opportunities within fintech, particularly in Asia, we're definitely a good place to start. But I think on that note, without further ado, it's important now that we switch over to the speakers. We go through a little presentation, as well as listening into the panel discussion, and hopefully it's something we all find interesting and engaging for today's session. So thank you very much, and look forward to connecting again soon, and to hopefully partnering with Bahrain's EDB in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Benjamin. That was quite insightful. And us at the Bahrain, we do look at Hong Kong and we work very closely with the Hong Kong FinTech ecosystem, and we look forward to collaborating even more. Moving to the next speaker, David Parker, who is again the co-Chief Investment Officer of Bahrain Economic Development Board, who will give you as well some background on Bahrain. Just before we move to David, quick housekeeping remarks. We will have some time for Q&A, so feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A function below once the panel kickstarts, and we'll make sure that that our panelists answer all your questions. So David, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dalal, and a special thank you, Benjamin, to you for your opening remarks, but also to everybody at the FinTech Association of Hong Kong for your support. We look forward to building, picking up on your closing remarks, FinTech bridges between Bahrain and Hong Kong moving forward. I was actually thrilled when I was asked to say a few welcome remarks today. The reason being, as you all know, I'm based in Bahrain, but as some of you might not know, I worked for Invest Hong Kong for 3 years between 2011 and 2014. Now, during that time, what I witnessed was Hong Kong's emergence, if you like, as a leading fintech hub for the region. And then when I came to Bahrain back in 2016, a lot of the developments here around fintech and the fintech ecosystem reminded me so much of what we'd gone through a few years earlier in Hong Kong. So I think we were perhaps a little bit later out of the blocks in Bahrain, but we've caught up fast. There were some amazing things going on here. And having had personal experience of both Bahrain and Hong Kong, it's remarkable just how many things they have in common. Hong Kong obviously is a financial powerhouse and has been for decades one of the leading financial centers in the world. But Bahrain has always been a leading financial center for the Middle East. We've just celebrated 100 years of banking in Bahrain. So both had a strong base, a strong foundation to build on, if you like, in terms of embracing the fintech agenda. Both have very respected regulators, as you would expect in long-established financial centers, but both have very progressive regulators as well. I always used to enjoy working with the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, and have really enjoyed working here in Bahrain with the Central Bank of Bahrain, who I have to say have been spearheading much of the innovation that we've been able to attract to the kingdom. The other thing that reminds me here in Bahrain of Hong Kong is the way that Hong Kong went through that transition away from traditional industries like finance, real estate, shipping, to embrace the tech innovation agenda, to become a startup hub, a home for entrepreneurs and innovators from around the world. Again, Bahrain going through a very similar transition, moving away, diversifying away from its reliance on oil. And really, we have a saying here that digital is the new oil, really embracing the innovation and technology agenda, attracting more startups, homegrown and international, in exactly the same way that Hong Kong did. Both locations punch well above their weight. I mean, Hong Kong is what, 7 million, Bahrain is just 1.5 million. And yet they both have such an important part to play within their respective regional economies and within the global economy. And of course, both are hugely important gateways to other markets that entrepreneurs might wish to explore. When I worked for Invest Hong Kong, we used to talk about the fact that if you fly out of Hong Kong airport within 5 hours flight time, you've got access to half the population of the world. Here in Bahrain, you've got access to the Middle East, to Africa, to Russia, Turkey, Europe, India, Mumbai, just 3 hours flight time away from Bahrain. So in the same way that Hong Kong serves as a gateway to Asia, Bahrain serves very much as a gateway to the Middle East. And perhaps to finish, in terms of the comparisons, I have to mention the T word, tax. We used to promote Hong Kong as a very low tax, very simple tax regime. Bahrain is no tax. So again, I've gone from a low tax regime to a no tax regime. Again, very attractive. And perhaps finally, two absolutely amazing places to live. Who wants to launch a business, be it FinTech or anything else, in a boring locations? Two of the most fascinating, interesting, welcoming locations on planet Earth. So the similarities between my time in Bahrain and my time working with Invest Hong Kong are significant, and that again is why I was so excited to have the opportunity to speak to you all today. Like Benjamin, I want to get out of the way and let the speakers, the presenters and the panelists kick in, but just to conclude by saying thank you. Thank you to Benjamin, thank you to the FinTech Association of Hong Kong, my colleagues at the EDB, all of the participants over the next hour, and of course everybody that signed in to find out more. Let's hope this is the beginning of a much stronger FinTech bridge between Bahrain and Hong Kong, with mutual benefits for our ecosystems over there and of course over here. Thank you very much, Stella.
Thank you, David. And now we're going to allow some time for Naseem to walk you through a brief presentation that will give and shed more light to what David have mentioned actually during his introductory remarks. And followed by that, we will go ahead to our panel discussion. So Naseem, please go ahead. Sorry, Naseem, just to interrupt you. I think you're on mute.
Hello, can you guys hear me now?
Yes, we can now.
Oh, great. Okay, so I'm going to go back now. So I was just introducing Bahrain's geography to you guys. I was saying that Bahrain basically is at the heart of the Arabian Gulf. We're connected to Saudi Arabia by a 25-kilometer causeway. Our population is quite small, so we're about 1.4 million people, with more than half of these being expats. And we're a tiny island, but I've always said tiny island, big dreams. Our financial services industry is actually one of the oldest in the region, so it's over 100 years old. And in terms of non-oil GDP, it's the biggest contributor, so it makes up about 17%. The sector employs 66% Bahrainis, and 39% of those are women. Go to the next slide. So a few years ago, so Bahrain's always been at the innovation forefront of the region. And a few years ago, our Central Bank of Bahrain, which is the sole regulator for the financial services industry here, has taken on a very innovative, progressive agenda in terms of digitization. So they've launched the FinTech Innovation Unit, at the Central Bank of Bahrain, and out of that came the first onshore regulatory sandbox in the MENA region, where interested fintech companies can come to Bahrain, sign up for the sandbox, test their products and solutions before actually going live. There's been ongoing collaboration between the central bank and the Financial Conduct Authority, out of which came the Global Financial Innovation Network. In 2018, we've established Bahrain FinTech Bay, which is MENA's largest FinTech hub. We're also the first in MENA region to launch open banking regulations and mandate it across the financial services sector. And we have 100% eKYC integration across all retail banks. It's been a very interesting journey, and it's an ongoing journey for the financial services sector here when it comes to FinTech. We've hit a lot of very interesting milestones. We've launched a lot of progressive regulations for the region. So we've now put in place crowdfunding regulations, open banking regulations, crypto assets exchange regulations, robo-advisory regulations, and more are coming. We're looking forward to add to these milestones. When it comes to benchmarking against international markets in terms of policies that have contributed to developing the ecosystem here, Bahrain is up there with some really strong players. We're on par with other markets such as Singapore and Australia, and we've actually found that in terms of regulations and policies, we're ahead of some very big markets as well, such as the United States, the United Kingdom, and the United Arab Emirates. David's mentioned this already. So we've got the most liberal tax regime in the region. 100% foreign ownership is allowed across most sectors. We don't have any free zone restrictions, no corporate taxes, no personal income taxes, and no wealth taxes or taxes on capital gains. Our workforce is some of the most highly skilled in the region as well. We're first in MENA, according to the World Bank, when it comes to the Human Capital Index. We were ranked first by the World Economic Forum for labor market flexibility. And we were ranked first on quality of education by the Expat Insider Survey as well. We're very unique because we also have a semi-government agency called Temkeen. And Temkeen's purpose is to improve the Bahraini workforce and make them the employee of choice by providing them training and assistance. And at the same time, by providing a range of business support solutions to enable businesses, local businesses, or any businesses set up here to respond to challenges and grow and prosper. We're also very cost competitive. So it's a lot more cost effective to set up, to operate, to work and live in Bahrain than the rest of our region. And when it comes to the financial services sector, we're actually 68% more cost effective than the UAE. We're also very nice, welcoming, warm people. If I may say so myself. Quality of life here ranks really high. We are ranked first for work-life balance, and we've got a very attractive cost of living. A lot of expats find that it's very easy to come to and set up and fit in and work and live in Bahrain. But don't take it from me, I'm Bahraini, so I think it's better if you guys actually come here and welcome and experience the welcome here yourselves. So in a nutshell, why Bahrain? We're an established financial hub. We are an environment that supports and promotes innovation. Our location is very strategic in the region. Our workforce is highly talented, and they are the employee of choice. We've got the region's first regulatory sandbox. We're quite cost competitive, and our government is very forward-looking. A little bit about the organization I work for. I work for the Bahrain Economic Development Board, and we're an investment promotion agency that's responsible for attracting investment and enhancing the business ecosystem here. We support with a few things like providing you with the right information to support your business decisions. When a company is ready to make that step, we support with registration. We offer a concierge service to streamline market entry, and our relationship doesn't end there. After company registration and setup, we work long-term to support and make sure that the businesses that do come to Bahrain are successful here. We've got a lot of offices across the world to help us achieve what we set out to do. In 11 countries from the United States to Japan. And we've got a representative office as well in China. We've got 2 offices in China. The first is in Beijing and the second is Shenzhen. And you'll see my colleagues' contact details at the end of this session. So please feel free to get in touch with any questions you have. That's it from me, but we are here for questions, and we've got the panel session coming up next.
Thank you so much, Naseem, and do feel free to our attendees to feel free to reach out to us on the email address bdfs@bahrainedb.com if you have any questions. If you have any questions during the panel, once again, just a quick reminder, housekeeping rules. Do feel free to put in your questions on the Q&A function. Without further ado, we will kickstart with our interesting panel, which I'm very excited to actually listen to it. It will be moderated by Syed Mushir Ahmed, who's the founder and director of FinTech Asia. On the panel as well will be Myrna Suleiman, founder and CEO of FinTech Galaxy, who's a very dear friend, and we started the FinTech journey at a very early stage. Yasmeen Janahi from the Central Bank of Bahrain, who we work very closely as Economic Development Board with the Central Bank of Bahrain. And last but not least, Bahrain FinTech Bay, who you'll hear all about from Badr Sater. So Syed Mushir, the floor is yours, and let's kickstart the panel.
Thank you, Dalal, and thank you for the EDB for having me. My name is Mushir Ahmed. I'm one of the co-founders of the FinTech Association of Hong Kong and currently on the board. I run an advisory firm, which is FinTech Asia, where we enable startups to scale across Asia and provide advisory on the same. Delighted to have all the speakers on the panel. I think it'll be a very informative session in terms of understanding the Bahraini landscape for FinTech companies and how companies from Hong Kong can take advantage of the regulatory and financial services environment there. So welcome panelists. Thanks for taking out time for our session today.
Thank you for having us.
Good morning.
Right, so we've had a good overview from David and Naseem on how the Bahraini financial services and generally speaking how the Bahraini's setup is, right? But based on your interaction with financial institutions, can you highlight the 3 main areas that are in focus currently in the market? What are the financial institutions looking for?
Well, I mean, I think all of the financial institutions across Bahrain, obviously, they have their own kind of roadmap and agenda of how they want to continue to digitize and improve their offering. I think what you can boil it down to really is companies really focusing on either how they can get efficiency gains internally, right? So any kind of fintechs that will provide them with services that will allow them to reduce or be able to reduce their costs. I think any fintech that will allow them to improve their customer experience is very important, as all of the financial institutions are right now, the offerings are getting closer and closer to each other. They're looking for that extra offering that will give them the edge, I guess, a little bit, something that's a little bit different than what their competitors are offering. And I think the last kind of area that they're looking for is, what are the different monetization or different fintechs that allow them to monetize the infrastructure which they already have, right? So, I mean, you're talking about banks right now, and as Naseem and David mentioned before earlier, that Bahrain's moving forward and very progressive, and with the open banking regulations that are in place. Now, how do we capitalize on that as a financial institution and make the most out of it? So I think all of the across the board, the banks are really looking for, what's the next thing that will give us the edge, whether it is in any of those three areas which I mentioned. Michelle, I think you're on mute.
Classic mistake, you're on mute the line of the year under COVID. So are you seeing any specific verticals of banking or insurance that seem to be in focus? For example, here in Hong Kong, RegTech and InsurTech and digital assets is quite a bit focus for a lot of the institutions. So wondering what the scene is in Bahrain through your network.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that, in focus right now, I think, in the past couple of years, in the past, we've seen a lot of interest on, digital onboarding and in KYC solutions and all of that. But I think we've kind of passed that. And I think now the real main focus that we have with a lot of our fintechs that we work with is around what kind of open banking solutions that they can integrate with, what kind of solutions are they going to be able to work with that will, again, as I mentioned, that they'll be able to monetize and to capitalize on the existing infrastructures that they have and the data that they already have collected on their user base. And I think, we're in a very interesting situation right now in Bahrain, where a lot of what's, the lines between what the financial institutions are offering and what the telecoms and other industries are offering is kind of getting a little bit blurred, right? And I think right now, every kind of institution is always looking for, again, that's differentiating factor. And I think that in general, what you'll find with Bahrain is that they're very open to ideas. They're very progressive in the way that they think about what's novel and innovative solutions that they can add to their portfolio to help service their customers. So I think that's. I know that sounds a little bit vague, but I mean, to be honest, we've seen such a huge variety of different services being discussed and working with, and across the board as in Bahrain FinTech Bay, we've been working with, at this point we have over 30 or so projects in the pipeline with different financial institutions and different banks, and they vary from everything, right? So it's there's a lot of opportunities here, and I think one thing that I want to say is that whenever you're looking at Bahrain as a financial hub, really just use it as that, as the hub, as your entry point into the market. I think once you're established there, you should then, I think, capitalize on your presence in the region for, looking at different markets within the GCC as well to operate out of Bahrain.
I think that's a perfect segue into my next question, which is for MENA, right? FinTech Galaxy has been working with a lot of fintechs, and you're based there. Would like to know, why does Bahrain become a good hub for setting up for fintech companies to access MENA or the GCC, as it were? What would you say are the main characteristics you found based on the network that you've been working with?
Thank you, Mashir, and good morning, everyone from the Middle East. Good afternoon from Asia and the rest of the world. If you look at the fintech ecosystem in absolute terms, it's based on 5 main pillars. The first one is capital. The second one is talent. Yeah, it's the startups, it's the entrepreneurs. And the third one is demand. So it's the consumers and the banks who are consuming innovation. Number 4 is infrastructure, mobility, technical capabilities. And the 5th one is regulations. Now, zoom into Bahrain. If you look at Bahrain, every other market around the region has pretty much some sort of the same 5 pillars, but Bahrain is leading in terms of regulations. And whenever we talk about fintech, the biggest bottleneck and the biggest driver, so it works both ways, is regulations. Fintech thrives on scalability. and it thrives on collaboration. Without open banking, there's only so much you can do. There's only so much you can do. Unless it's a market as big as Egypt or Saudi maybe, there's only little that a fintech can do. So that's why whenever fintechs want to establish presence in the region, whenever they want to actually test their product, they want to get a license, they think of Bahrain as the entry point. And we have an amazing relationship with the central bank, with all the players. I mean, the EDB is driving that cross-border collaboration between financial sector internally and around the world. And another thing that fintechs love about Bahrain is basically the one-stop shop. It's very confusing when you go to a market and you have multiple entities to talk to, multiple regulators to talk to, multiple door openers to knock. In Bahrain, you want to establish, you go to FinTech Bay, you want to enter the market, you go to EDB, you want to get a regulations, you go to the central banks. It's very much simple and straightforward. Mute.
Yep. Never learned. Right. Thank you so much for that, Mirna. I want to bring in Yasmeen Janahi right now to talk a little bit more about what the regulators are doing. For fintech firms, regulatory environment and regulations are a key element, especially when you're going into newer regions. Can you please tell us what the fintech unit is responsible for and how the Central Bank of Bahrain has been supporting innovation for the financial services sector over the last 3-4 years?
Thank you so much, Mashir. First of all, I'd like to thank the Bahrain EDB and the FinTech Association of Hong Kong for hosting this event. I think this is a very important conversation for us to be embarking on. So I think a common misconception around the world is that regulation stifles innovation. I just want to say at the Central Bank of Bahrain, we don't have that idea, and we don't use that when it comes to what we do on a daily basis. So the Central Bank of Bahrain's FinTech journey started in October of 2017, and that is when the FinTech and Innovation Unit was formed. So what the FinTech and Innovation Unit does in a nutshell is that we oversee and monitor sandbox companies. So currently we have 26 companies within our regulatory sandbox. We also approve of companies that are applying to enter the regulatory sandbox. And this is done through a regulatory sandbox committee that I'm going to go into more detail of after this. And we also research fintech developments. Now, this might not be done in the classic research way, although that does happen, of course, but we are part of 2 working groups. So we're part of the Global Financial Innovation Network that is headed by the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK. And we're also part of the GCC Secretariat Working Group. Now, I think these are 2 working groups that are very important to mention because they do promote knowledge sharing and cross collaboration between regulators, both regionally and globally around the world. So in order to tackle your question, I do want to describe our financial sector in Bahrain in a nutshell. So our financial sector is quite thriving and important. In fact, it contributes to 16.7% of our GDP. Now, that's quite a large number, as it is the 2nd largest contributor after oil. So as David had mentioned previously, digitization is the new oil, and I do believe that wholeheartedly, and Bahrain has proven that. So apart from that, within the financial sector, you see a shift in consumer demands, and you see a hunger for a more technologically driven market and economy. So, just as an example, with the COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen a complete shift to consumers being more drawn to technology and contactless payments. So that does describe the ever-evolving demands of our consumers within our market and our technology-driven consumers within this market. So as a central bank, of course, when looking at this financial sector, we want to be able to push out regulations that support innovation and support the ever-evolving consumer demands that are present within our market. So in a nutshell, we pushed out regulations in terms of our regulatory sandbox that I had mentioned. We pushed out digital financial advice regulations, crypto asset regulations, to name a few. So this is the start of a journey for us, and we plan on continuing and welcoming global companies and local companies alike to join us on this journey.
Thank you for that. Moving on, once we have the regulatory setup, people understand that, it's a forward-looking regulator. I know Sandbox was one of the first things that came forward. We'll talk a little bit more on that, as we mentioned. Ecosystem players are always important. We, as FinTech Association of Hong Kong, have been building the ecosystem here for FinTech companies and the financial institutions and helping that grow, mature, and work with regulators, policymakers, and the ecosystem. And I do know that both the Bahrain FinTech Bay and the FinTech Galaxy have been doing that. But could we know a little bit more about the important role that you're playing to help the development and growth of FinTechs when they're coming into the newer market? What role is the Bahrain FinTech Bay playing, Badr, and how are you supporting international FinTechs? Similar question for MENA on FinTech Galaxy, yeah. So we'll start with Badr, and then we can have MENA answer right after that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that so Bahrain FinTech Bay, for those of you who are not aware, so we were established about 2.5 years ago, and really as primarily to become a FinTech ecosystem builder, right, for the country. And we are primarily what we're focused on. I mean, to become a builder, there's a lot of different verticals that you need to cover, right? So what we do is we look at, first of all, we have a group of founding partners who are most of the financial institutions that are in Bahrain, all of the major financial institutions, and they have a financial contribution to Bahrain FinTech Bay, and so that's how we survive. We're a private entity. We're not a government entity. And I think based off of that, a lot of what we do to service these partners is around sort of kind of key verticals that we have. So the first being education. So we run a program with Georgetown University where we give a lot of training and support. We do workshops and so on for our founding partners. The second area is thought leadership and research. So we have a research team where we push out publications on different important matters for the country, because we found that information in the region is or specifically in Bahrain and generally in the region, is lacking, and so we needed to kind of take a step into that, and so we launch reports on a quarterly and bi-yearly basis. Besides that, we also have our incubation space. So this is a physical incubation space at Bahrain FinTech Bay, where we currently host around 50 startups in our space. We're one of the largest, if not the largest, cluster of fintechs in the GCC. In the GCC region, and obviously the fintechs that we have in our space are very varied from all around the world, and at different sizes. So we have quite late stage companies, and we also have very early stage companies. I think the next area that we focus on is around acceleration. And when we talk about acceleration, I think that there's a kind of a few different programs that we run depending on what, catering to different types of startups and different stages of startups. So we have early stage incubation programs, which typically are done in partnership with our founding partners. So for example, we ran a program completely virtually a couple of months ago with Standard Chartered Bank, where we brought their global women in tech kind of initiative to Bahrain. And that was mostly focused on supporting local startups and local fintechs. And then we also run what we call our venture acceleration platform, which is for late and growth stage fintechs, which helps global fintechs. Basically, the platform helps global fintechs come into the Bahrain market. And I think this is probably the program which most of the attendees would be probably interested in. It's a program where we basically, what we do is, because we have a very close relationship with our founding partners and with the banks in Bahrain, we work closely for understanding their strategies and the exact challenges that they face in different business lines, right? And then we work with our global network of fintechs to partner up with them and bring them on board into Bahrain and match make them directly. It's a very bespoke kind of program. It is very much a one-to-one type of where we identify the problem and we identify the solution and we bring them together. And it's done, typically most of the work primarily is done, over the web. And once we see that there's some traction, then we invite the guests over, where with the support of like the likes of the EDB and the other players in Bahrain, we help bring them along a roadshow and meet all of the key players. So yeah, sorry, in a nutshell, I mean, that's quite a few different areas that where we look at, but yeah.
That's quite useful for the audience to understand. MENA, what about the FinTech Galaxy?
Okay, so FinTech Galaxy is a virtual platform, unlike FinTech Bay, which is more of a physical on-the-ground operations that supports collaboration. We are a virtual platform. We focus on two main areas. The first one is we facilitate collaboration within the same ecosystem. So we support the collaboration between banks and fintechs, regulators and fintechs, regulators and banks, and also cross-border collaborations. So any fintech that is in Hong Kong, UK, Africa, they want to move to Bahrain, they want to collaborate with Bahrain, they want to expand to Bahrain. They don't need to do any physical activity, especially, you know, when you look around the world and you see how the world is socially connected but distant. We provide the platform to support that. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we drive innovation through an open API platform that allows financial institutions to run innovation challenges, hackathons, accelerators on the platform, and also for fintechs to use a regulatory sandbox, the regulatory sandbox of the CBB, which is pure digital coming on the platform, and also a technical sandbox. Now, our collaboration with the central bank, with EDB and the financial institutions in Bahrain has actually resulted in launching a platform which is called FinHub 973. This is the first of its kind in the whole region. I think something similar to it would be Apex in Singapore. So basically what the platform does is it's a virtual open API innovation platform. It basically enables local and global fintech startups to connect seamlessly and virtually with Bahrain's financial institutions to explore collaboration, to test, and also to integrate and commercialize based on the Bahrain open banking standards. And this is very, very important. The platform allows four main activities. The first one is crowdsourcing, which I just mentioned, hackathons and challenges on the platform. We're running now Bahrain Islamic Bank activity. We're also running an ABC Bank activity. It also includes a global marketplace of fintechs. We have around 1,500 fintechs right now, including MENA and global that are interested in MENA. It has, number three, it has an open API platform and sandbox, basically, to prototype, to test, and to pitch ideas on the platform to institutions. And the fourth one, which is very important, it's integration with the regulatory sandbox, which is very critical for any fintech. That's the FinHub 973.
Thanks, and I think it's a good segue into our next question, which is to Yasmeen. The FinTech Sandbox was launched in 2017 by the Central Bank of Bahrain, and it is among the earliest sandboxes introduced globally. I think HKMA also was around the same time. And as you said, you're also a member of the GFIN, which is another important element of engaging. Can you please tell us more about what's the key elements of the sandbox, why people should get into a sandbox versus applying for normal licenses? And secondly, if you're able to give more details on how international firms can engage or apply for the sandboxes, what are their key requirements for that?
Absolutely. So the regulatory sandbox is a very important part of what we do at the FinTech and Innovation Unit at the Central Bank of Bahrain. So it was launched in May 2017. So what is the regulatory sandbox? It is basically a virtual space for fintechs and financial institutions alike to be able to push out their solutions and break into the market. Of course, this is done with some thresholds. Now, we don't like the sandbox companies to exceed the 9 to 12 month mark. So, and we also have thresholds that are placed by a regulatory sandbox committee that I had mentioned earlier. So the regulatory sandbox committee comprises of many different members of the Central Bank of Bahrain and many different directorates, and they are in charge of admitting sandbox companies, approving of applications or rejecting them, and placing certain thresholds. Now, the directorates that are in the committee from the Central Bank of Bahrain are quite diverse. So to name a few, we've got directorates from the IT directorate, we've got the payments oversight, legal, the FinTech and Innovation Unit, licensing, and this is just to name a few. So we like to have a diverse view and a well-informed decision when it comes to admitting sandbox companies, which explains the diverse makeup of the committee. So in terms of thresholds that are usually placed, as I said, we like a 12-month period for the sandbox, and we don't usually allow companies to exceed that 12-month period. Apart from that, there are thresholds placed in terms of transaction sizes and volunteer customer sizes. So in terms of volunteer customer sizes, typically we don't allow them to exceed the 100 volunteer customer size mark. So apart from that, when a sandbox company is ready to graduate, once they hit that 12-month mark, we require them to submit 2 reports. One of them being the management report, and this final management report needs to be signed by upper management of the sandbox entity, and just comprises of the business model and solution and the progress and whether the KPIs were met during the sandbox period. The second report is a report prepared by a third-party independent consultant, which is basically an audit review of the sandbox company and its solution. It is important to note that this consultant needs to be pre-approved by the Central Bank of Bahrain before it launches this report. Now, currently we've got 26 companies within our sandbox, and this comprises of companies from all over the world. It's quite a global range. So we've got companies ranging from Japan to New Zealand, and we actually do have a company from Hong Kong operating in the sandbox currently. So this just speaks to the global view that the sandbox brings to place. And it is an online application in the end of the day at the Central Bank of Bahrain's website. So we welcome companies from all over the world and locally to be able to apply and join the sandbox. So I think it's important to note that the sandbox authorization is simply that. It is an authorization. It isn't a licensed entity. And that's to say that a sandbox company does not have to adhere to the full obligations that a licensed entity might have to adhere to. So to name a few, that would mean no capital requirements, no organizational structure or risk management structure. But of course, as I had mentioned earlier, the sandbox entity does have to comply with the thresholds that are placed by the Regulatory Sandbox Committee, as well as the CBB's AML policies. Now, just to briefly talk about the innovation brought forth by the sandbox, I think that the sandbox is innovative by its very nature. For example, before we had the sandbox, one of our first graduates from the sandbox was an open banking services provider. And so before that, we didn't have open banking regulations, but after we saw the need for the service within our market and the need for consumer demand for open banking, we saw that this is an important service to be had in our economy. So now we are the first country in the GCC to mandate all retail banks to comply with open banking standards. And actually quite recently, on October 24th, we've released our Bahrain Open Banking Framework to complement those open banking regulations that were in place. So finally, I just want to end this question by saying that the sandbox may seem like a learning opportunity for those companies that are testing out their solutions, but it's also a learning opportunity for us as regulators. It's a bit of a relationship there because we get to learn about these companies that are operating globally and these services that may be of use within our market. So it certainly has been a fruitful experience thus far.
Thank you so much for that overview, Yasmeen. It's quite useful for people to understand how the sandbox works. And I mean, obviously there's a lot more to go into the nitty-gritties, but this is a good overview for the introduction. I think we can open the floor for any questions that the audience may have for the panelists, as well as for David and Naseem, if you had anything. Please feel free to either raise your hand or use the Q&A function to ask your question, please. While we wait for a question to come through, Mira, I'm going to quickly ask you this question. You know, one of the things while people are looking to go cross-border is understanding of cultural nuances, right? And they're different in different parts of the world. And, you know, East Asia works differently to South Asia, to Southeast Asia, to West Asia. So what would you, from your experience of having, you know, nurtured a lot of international fintechs as well, what would you say would be 3 cultural nuances that they need to be aware of, both from a business perspective as well as local culture, which differs from other places potentially?
That's actually a very, very important question. And it's one of the areas where fintechs usually fail when they want to go cross-border and they want to go to the region. The first thing that I would tell, and I always tell the international fintechs coming to the region, is understand the differences between each market. The Middle East and North Africa, or the Arab world in general, is not a one blanket economy. You have oil exporters versus oil importers. You have the Gulf versus Levant. North Africa, each one of the markets has its own detailed, intricate characteristics, and you have to understand those. So this is super important. The second thing is you need to understand the regulatory drivers, because if something will not fly in a certain regulation according to a certain jurisdiction, you're gonna run out of cash, you're gonna run out of resources and basically stamina until you deliver the promises that you had given your investors. So if you think that open banking is coming to Egypt, but it's already in Bahrain, and you need open banking for, let's say, account aggregation, don't wait for another market. Start with a market that actually offers you this particular feature. And then when you want to expand, you can expand into other markets. It's very important. People think that, oh, if Bahrain has this, then Egypt has that, or Saudi has it. It's very, very different. And the third thing that I always tell them is, when you're doing B2B business, when you're into the B2B fintech, it's very important to build relationships and stakeholder management and understand the agendas of each one of the executives you're dealing with before you need them. Attend the FinTech, you know, that day you had Hong Kong FinTech Week. Any company that wants to go into Hong Kong should actually attend this event. Bahrain had the Middle East Financial Forum. They should have attended this event to understand why Bank ABC is different from Bank, you know, Ithmar Bank, and what is so special about ILA. They need to know the people. They need to know the banks. They need to know what makes Hassan Jarrar tick, you know, like you need to know the people, the institutions, the strategies before you enter these markets.
Yeah, if I may just add, I guess, to that, I think Mira makes up, you know, an excellent point there, right? I mean, I think people don't necessarily realize that in the Middle East, I think we're a bit closer, I guess, to Asian markets, but not so much to the Western markets, in the sense that we're very much relationship driven, right? And I think it's important to understand people, to talk to people and build that trust with them. And at the end of the day, I think people buy, you know, organizations buy from people, not from, you know, organizations. They have to trust the people that they work with. And once you build that trust, it becomes a lot easier to kind of go through. And I think that's kind of, again, one of the roles that we play as, you know, Bahrain FinTech Bay, is we try to ease out that kind of gap, because we have, you know, relationships with the financial institutions and the banks and so on. When we have global companies or global fintechs wanting to come in, they need to understand the lay of the land very quickly, and that we help them, you know, bridge that gap and get them to work directly and very closely with these people. And throughout the processes or throughout the time when we're having these discussions, we would always, kind of give feedback on, this, your approach on your last kind of meeting was a little bit, a bit off. It was too direct. We should, look at this from. So this kind of advice, these nuances are really, really important. And I think that's at the end of the day, what makes a big difference to the success of companies who are looking to come to the Middle East.
Thank you.
Sorry,
yeah,
Mashir, if I can just add on to that very quickly. I absolutely agree with the points that Mirna and Bedr had brought up. I think it is a relationship-driven market. I absolutely agree with that. And I agree with the fact that we are a very open, cosmopolitan community. And I think the openness of the regulator is something to pride ourselves on in the end of the day, because we have been reported to be accessible with the licensees in the end of the day. We employ an open door policy and discuss regulations with licensees, and that is something that can be noted within our discussion papers. And we're regarded internationally, and we'd like to basically employ these supervisory standards that we have set in place, and we want to uphold that reputation. I just want to say that Bahrain is establishing itself as a fintech powerhouse in the end of the day, and this is done with a strong talent pool, innovation-friendly regulation, and a collaborative ecosystem. So it's just the beginning of a journey for us, and we welcome any companies that like to join us on this journey.
That's great. I was just going to very quickly ask, so we have one question which we can take, I would say, from Emmanuel, which is on at the time of COVID, relationships are harder to build face-to-face. How can they get over the temporary hurdle? Probably, Mirna, you're probably in a good place for that, considering a lot of what FinTech Galaxy does is virtual. So would you like to take that?
It is challenging, to be honest. Nothing replaces a face-to-face meeting, a coffee and a conversation. But then the world is changing and we have to live with reality. So it's always important that whenever you build a relationship, try to think of what's in it for them before what's in it for us. Any relationship that you build with, and that, by the way, I learned when I was a journalist before I even, in my previous life, there's always, relationships are built on mutual benefit, okay? And we're talking here about professional relationships, not like personal relationships. There's always a benefit. What's in it for me and what's in it for him? So let's say, I'll give you an example, okay? When you are a fintech let's say you're a fintech in Hong Kong interested in coming to Bahrain. You want to enter the Bahraini market, but you don't know where to start, right? So you get in touch with FinTech Galaxy, and the moment here that you decide to get in touch with anyone who will open the doors for you into Bahrain, you need to show the value that you're going to bring to the Bahraini market so that they in return show you the value that you can have from this particular market. And that doesn't need a face-to-face meeting. That needs a Zoom call. And by the way, we at FinTech Galaxy, we never had an office. We've always been virtual. We don't even go to places. Like, we travel a lot. We used to travel a lot. But most of our business we run on virtual platforms, and now I can see Yasmeen and Bedr, and I think a conversation of that sort, the content is very important as much as the face-to-face meeting is important. So back to your question, Emmanuel, you need to understand what's in it for them, the others, before what's in it for you. And based on that, any relationship will flourish. You have to remember as well, the MENA region in particular is based on a lot of trust. And Bedr mentioned the word trust. Trust is important, and long-term vision. We used to call them the suitcase bankers in the old days. Those people who come, take your money and then go because the region has a lot of money. These days are gone. And now it's all about long-term relationships and benefiting each other. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are all, really good points. And I just want to add one thing to that. I mean, I think, as Bahrain FinTech Bay, right, in the beginning of the pandemic, it brought up big questions, right? I mean, if we can't see the people that we interact with, that we have a relationship with, how will that affect the way that we do business? And what's surprising, well, what actually surprised us, I mean, so we've been working from home since, you know, the good past, since maybe end of February is when we started working from home. And I think that throughout this time, we've been constantly surprised by how quickly the norms of how business is being done has changed, and people have just adapted to it. If you tell me, like, this time last year, having a call where you're at home and it's very clear that you're at home, it would have been something which is completely unusual and not really acceptable, right, as a business meeting. But now it's completely normal, right? And we've noticed that even throughout this whole time, we have not seen a drop off in the number of projects and the number of partnerships that we've done. And in the contrary, we've actually grown the number of fintechs that we're working with and grown the number of partners that we have quite significantly. So we're talking about a 30 to 40% growth. So for us, I think, you know, overall, it's been very challenging, but I think it's been also a good opportunity. And I really don't think that things will go back 100% to how they were before COVID.
And absolutely, if I can just bounce off of that, I think we have seen a shift in consumer demands during this time period. As I had mentioned earlier, consumers are now are technology driven, and they'd rather do everything through their smartphone rather than wait at a bank. But also we've seen a surge in contactless payments and card system payments during the COVID-19 pandemic. Speaking from my own experience in the Central Bank of Bahrain, we've seen a surge in sandbox companies applying to the regulatory sandbox during the COVID-19 pandemic. And it is a technologically advanced world that we are living in now. These are the times, and Bahrain, I think, has proven itself strong in adapting to these times. And that's not just specific to the COVID-19 pandemic. This has been, even historically, Bahrain has always adapted to the times, and we will continue to do so.
I think that's a great note to end the panel on, Yasmeen, which is Bahrain has been a center for many years, for decades even, or centuries. And now we have an opportunity for Hong Kong firms to not only set up in Bahrain, but also explore the GCC and MENA region through Bahrain. So once again, thank you to the panelists, Yasmeen, Badr, and Mirna, for their wonderful insights. And I think it was quite useful for all of our attendees, and for both from a FinTech Association. I would like to personally thank you all for taking out time to make our members understand this. I will now hand over to Naseem and Dalal on closing the panel.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to our esteemed panelists. That was a very exciting and interesting discussion. And for those who joined us, thank you very much. Once again, should you have any questions, feel free to reach out to our colleagues, Meow Meow at BahrainEDB.com, or our colleague Yun Jiang as well, both based in China. We are also available in Bahrain. If you also wish to reach out to any of our esteemed panelists or speakers, we'll make sure to connect you directly to them. So once again, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to doing more of these events in the future. Thank you.